What are common mistakes people make in a relationship? Trying too hard to avoid potential arguments, to avoid conflict rather than hashing it out before the issue becomes too big to handle. They can swing back at you much harder than before. It weakens the foundation of the relationship. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, yeah. A 2-minute chat about what their plans are Friday night is so much better for everyone than going okay then having a 2-hour fight on Saturday morning. Know when to apologize and shut up. Sometimes it really is your fault, so accept it, own it and move on. Dwelling on a point, arguing or over-explaining does no one any good. In the same line, if your partner messes up, accept the apology and let it go. An old couple once told me the secret is to not keep score. It's so much easier to remember what the other person did wrong than what your own mistakes were, and it'll only foster resentment. Not to state the obvious, but also, don't just apologize and shut up. Make sure the apology isn't stated as a simple means to end the discussion and seriously recognize how it made them feel. The most common mistakes that couples make are not actively listening to one another, taking their partner for granted, and pushing aside problems because they don't want to cause an argument. We call it a brick, and a brick is not allowed to stand more than a day or you risk another one. Addressing issues at the brick level assures they don't become larger, unrecognizable barriers over time. It takes two to guard against it and actively demolish the foundations that drive people apart. When arguments do happen, there's a danger in making the other person the enemy, too. When my wife and I did premarital counseling, they taught us to treat the problem as the enemy and fight it as a team. Like you said, actively listening is critical, and doing so can help couples learn how to work as a team to overcome the issues they're facing. Taking your partner for granted is a big one. I read this and hear this a lot. I will admit that I don't think I do this with my partner, but I also do not have a very firm grip on what taking someone for granted looks like. It's always been one of those things that people can use correctly, but not type up a quick definition of. The definition always seems to be an anecdote or example of a time someone does it. The other one I notice this with is calling someone self-righteous. This is something I'm struggling with right now. My girlfriend fell on some really hard times due to COVID. Losing multiple jobs due to shutdowns, financial hardship, being treated like shit by friends, etc. I've been blessed to avoid any major issues over the last year. So I've been paying for pretty much everything. I've been her shoulder to cry on. I always tell her how beautiful she is, how happy she makes me, etc. I'm lucky if I even get a thank you or a hug/kiss of appreciation. I pretty much never hear anything nice said in return unless I fish for it. I do these things because that's just the kind of person I am, but feeling like I'm not appreciated for any of it hurts. But of course I keep thinking maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe it's stress from work and school making me overthink these things. Maybe it's my fear of commitment after being single for 8 years. But I just want to know what I do is appreciated and that I'm cared about. I don't feel like it's that hard. Not speaking up the first, second, or third time your partner does something that bothers or harms you or makes you uncomfortable, etc. The longer you wait before saying something, the more ingrained it will become for them and the more likely you will fly off the handle over it later. I'm going to have trouble with this. Haven't dated yet, and won't until I'm out of the house, but I have a feeling I'm going to let my first per second so walk all over me. Tried doing this because he always mentioned his baby mama, but I ended up being selfish. Things fall apart if you don't look after them. Professor Langdon in Inferno. It's easy to get so comfortable in a relationship that you take it, or the other person, for granted. A true gentleman leaves no puzzle unsolved, Professor Layton. Chinua Achebe. Not being able to communicate. You need to be able to voice when you are hurt without them taking it as an attack. You need to be able to hear your partner. 100% agree. Although I do think it's important to encourage learning how to communicate. Many adults just simply don't know how to do this, and I do believe it's a learnable skill. Should you waste your life with a partner who has no interest in self-development and learning to communicate? Probably not. Should you discuss this with your soul who has poor communication skills and create a plan to work together and improve communication? Yes. Labeling your partner the source of all your happiness and joy. As Kiss said in their oft-forgotten 80s ballad, everybody needs a reason to live, but it can't be your love. 100% this. I know the phrase "how can you be happy with someone else if you're not happy alone" has become hated because some people feel like it's saying people with depression should never be in a relationship, but it's not really about that. As someone who has been put in the position of someone's entire happiness and joy, it is extremely stressful. Because the flip side ends up being I'm unhappy, how can my partner fix it? Even if it's not a conscious or intentional thing. Lie. Don't do it. The uncomfortable situation you avoid now is far better than what's down the line. You need attraction. You need trust. Communicate. 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 The other person is flawed, just like you. Accept that. Be a decent human, don't lie and cheat. There, done. Enjoy. Yup, that pretty much covers it. Damn, already failed rule 1. That love is a feeling. You can fall in love with someone, but it's more of a choice to be deeply connected with this one person. Over time you constantly choose to love them through the good and the bad. If you base your entire relationship off of how love is a feeling, you're most likely going to fall out of love with them. Yep, this was a big lesson for me. Tim Minchin's songs "If I Didn't Have You and You Grew On Me" should be required listening, I swear. I think having deal breakers in relationships is obviously good to set your standards, but I know so many people who have the most petty and dumb deal breakers that just result in them never willing to compromise or be satisfied. It's 100% okay to not have the same hobbies or be the exact same person. Variety is the spice of life. I worked with a guy who broke up with his GF of 4 years because she got a small tattoo on her ankle. He was so upset about the fact that their relationship had to end because of it. After getting divorced from a woman that became severely neglectful/verbally abusive and dating for a few years after that, I definitely have a strong idea of what deal breakers are for me, and they exist because I know with a very high certainty that a relationship simply isn't sustainable, for me, not anyone else, with these characteristics, any form of unfaithfulness. I dated one girl for a year that would constantly check out other guys even when I took her to a nice date, would only post solo photos of herself on social media on trips I took her because she liked to act single and liked the attention of guys in her DMs, and more worse stuff I won't mention. It's just not for me. I am loyal and faithful maybe to a fault, and I appreciate that in my partner. This one is the most important to me. If they cannot handle conflict resolution in a fairly respectful and mature manner, it simply won't work. Anyone that resorts to severe neglect, silent treatment for a week until you crawl back and apologize, abusive name calling and not caring about what you have to say and your hurt feelings, etc. In my experience, this is often the killer in many relationships. Conflict resolution is so important because all relationships will have conflict. How you deal with it can determine your future with that person. Assuming your partner should know what you want if they love you. I struggled early in our marriage because the women in my wife's family are big on this. We worked on it and it took a bit, but we got to the point where we would only hold each other accountable to expressed words and thoughts. It has made all the difference in the world, and 27 years of marriage have been mostly happy. Also, comparisons. Never say well my last so did this or my family always did it another way. Good way to alienate a partner. My family always did it another way. One of the moments that helped build my relationship with my wife was about hanging out washing. She accused me of doing it wrong because I didn't hang out washing the same way her mother had taught her. I explained that I wasn't doing it wrong, I was doing it differently because I was doing it the way my mother had taught me. It was a minor thing, and by no means an argument, but the acknowledgement that just because we have different ways of doing things, doesn't mean either of us is wrong is pretty powerful. Oh, this one is so true. I, and pretty much all of my female friends, were ingrained with the idea that you shouldn't speak out if something's bothering and you should just ignore it. Naturally, this led to some heated arguments, from bottling stuff up and having it all burst out at once. It took a good while for us all to undo this mindset and actually communicate our problems with our partners instead of getting mad they couldn't work it out. Subscribe for more hot Reddit takes in your inbox, guaranteed.